Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Southeast Radio.
Good morning, I'm Karl Fitzpatrick and welcome to Business Matters. Coming up on this morning's show, the company which used fraudsters to develop their business model, a preview of next week's Leader Tourism Forum, and why a local business consultant is warning entrepreneurs not to be prisoners of their past. Well, for my first guest, his business, Urban Fox, was not his first foray into entrepreneurship. Having started with a different target market in mind, he pivoted the business and adapted the technology to enable it to combat the growing problem of online fraud. Daniel Loftus joins me now to discuss this decision and to reveal why he engaged with fraudsters when developing his business model. Daniel, what is Urban Fox and where did the idea for this business come from?
Sure. So Urban Fox is a fraud detection and prevention software solution for large enterprise customers. So we'd be dealing with the likes of payment processors, banks, large online retailers, to help them stop a very specific type of online fraud that's known as synthetic fraud, which has become a very popular method of fraud in the last number of years. The idea really came about a year ago. So we were building Urban Fox as a totally different software solution for the marketing industry. And to be quite honest, we were getting nowhere with it. You know, there was a lot of interest, but not a lot of people willing to put their hands in their pockets to pay for it. And it was only when we started doing a little bit of work with the NDRC in Dublin that they encouraged us to sort of seek out other uses for the software. And at the time, fraud had been top of our agenda. Just it's very trackable from our point of view. There's a lot of rich data around it. So we began to trial and see would Urban Fox work in that environment, and we were delighted to see that it did.
I understand that when you were creating the technology, you decided to speak with fraudsters themselves. I'd be interested to hear your rationale for this and how it ultimately benefited Urban Fox.
Sure. So we realized early on that this particular type of fraud is very human-led. So what a lot of people think of when they think of online fraud is, you know, the lonely hacker sitting in a basement, you know, trying to steal credit card numbers. But in reality, it has become a much more sophisticated operation than that. These are businesses. They employ people. They employ software engineers, data scientists, you know, essentially call center operators. And one of the things they rely on is, you know, mimicking human behavior. So they're not creating sort of automated accounts to defraud credit cards. They're going about this as if it was, you know, real humans doing real things online. And that's something we could find no information about. Like we could get lots of information about how the fraud industry works, you know, who the major players are in terms of who are the companies providing solutions. But we couldn't find anywhere where there was information from actual fraudsters. So, you know, through a fairly laborious process, we ended up talking to quite a number of these, both online and in person. And the amount of information that we were able to glean from that was absolutely phenomenal. It altered significantly the way that we were building the technology. It allowed us to have a lot more intelligent conversations with our customers, sort of to have the inside track, so to speak.
And Daniel, how did you incentivize these fraudsters to share such information with you?
So that was one of the things we were quite surprised with. A lot of them are quite happy to brag and to talk about what they do. There's a level of competitiveness between a lot of these sort of more sophisticated fraudsters, especially the ones who are building some of the more technical solutions. A lot of them are more than happy to talk. That being said, we didn't necessarily say we were building a solution to try and stop them.
Now, at the top of the interview, you mentioned the term synthetic fraud. It's a new one on me, so you might explain it to us.
Sure. So synthetic fraud is basically where a fraudster creates new online personas or new online accounts using data that is both real and fake. So, we've all heard about these data leaks. There was a major airline hit a couple of months ago, travel agencies, things like that, where data has been leaked, where there's real information in it. So they might have, first names, second names, email addresses, phone numbers, addresses, things like that. And what these fraudsters are doing is they're taking, we'll say, my first name, your second name, an email address they have just created, her phone number, his address, and they're building a new online persona, a fake account. And then they will log into those accounts, we'll say on Amazon or on a banking website or whatever, and they will make that account look real. So, they might add stuff to a shopping cart, they might take it away, they might contact the customer support. They'll do things that you and I, as real, legitimate customers, might do, but they're doing that to make the account look real. And then when they're ready to essentially defraud that account, they're going to use their stolen credit cards as one method of what's called cashing out. So they'll make purchases from these companies, or indeed, in some of the more insidious examples, they're applying for loans, especially these payday loans, things like that, using people who look real but aren't real. They're essentially synthetic people, and that's where the term comes from.
So how does Urban Fox stop this online fraud?
So at its heart, Urban Fox monitors behaviours. So we know, Urban Fox knows what real customers are doing and what motivates real customers. So, if you and I go on to Amazon to buy a TV, we're buying the TV because it's something we want in our homes, or we want to give as a gift or whatever. But fraudsters are motivated differently. They're buying that television or that PlayStation or applying for that loan for fraudulent reasons. They want to sell that on again so they can get cash out the other end. And the behaviours around that are significantly different to how you and I would buy things. So to give you an example of that, in the example I gave earlier on where they're adding things to the cart, a lot of times what you'll see is they might add inexpensive items to a shopping cart. So, for example, pairs of socks, and then they'll take them away, and they might add a jacket or a scarf or something like that. So they're nearly building up this level of trust, and then they're adding the sort of prize item, the TV or the high-end electronics that they know when that arrives, they can sell it on in order essentially to launder the money from the credit card that they've stolen.
So the more sophisticated these synthetic fraudsters get, the more difficult it will be for you to be able to tell the difference.
Yeah, so we've even encountered in the last number of weeks a significant uptick in some of the sophistication on some of the fraud groups that we actively monitor. But at the end of the day, what they're all doing is, we can look at fraud as this sort of complex system, and it is highly complex both from a technical point of view and an organizational point of view. But at the end of the day, all they're doing is they're laundering money. So they have a credit card at one end that they can't legitimately use. They have to put layers to protect themselves. And then at the other end, you have a cash out event. So that's the purchase of something that they later go on to sell or whatever it might be. And those two behaviours never, ever change. There's always the sort of laundering event at the start, and there's always the cash out event at the end. And we've built some really clever technology in the middle that can adapt to changes in sophistication quite rapidly.
So who's your sweet spot target market in relation to this product?
So that's a great question. We're still in a process of exploring that and figuring that out. At the moment, it's the payment processors. So these are the people who handle the payment transaction from the website to the bank to the card. These have the biggest the biggest exposure because they're the ones that are paying the insurance premiums when something does go wrong. And at the moment, they're probably our closest to sweet spot customers, followed then by online merchants. And indeed, we're investigating at the moment the aviation industry, especially around fraud linked to air miles and points.
I'm just thinking that there's probably a small pool of insurance companies that are currently underwriting the risks with payment processors. Have you considered approaching these insurance companies with a view to making this technology mandatory for those that they've insured?
We've certainly thought about it. At the moment, it's quite a tall ask for the insurance companies. A lot of other competitors have tried that same play in the past, and it's quite difficult to get buy-in from all the individual segments essentially along the pipeline. So you'd have to get buy-in from the insurance companies, the merchants, the payment processors, the banks, the card issuers. So there's quite a long pathway to success in that model, but it's something we have looked at, for year 2 or year 3, where there would be an insurance-based play around this.
So talk to me about your plans to bring Urban Fox to the US market and the due diligence which you've undertaken in advance of this expansion.
So we always had identified the US as our primary market for this technology. It has the largest concentration of our target customers, and to be fair, they're a lot faster to pick up on new concepts and new technology there. Coupled together with that, I have quite a good network, especially in the west coast of the US. So in terms of the due diligence, I can't say there was a magic bullet or anything like that. We sort of Googled what companies we would ideally like as customers and found their headquarters, most of them based in the US, especially again on the west coast. And we relied quite a lot on Enterprise Ireland and especially their network of offices over there to help guide us a little bit and make introductions into the US market.
And finally, Daniel, you were listed in the Independent's top 30 business people under the age of 30 for 2018. But is it your plan to build Urban Fox to keep it or to sell it?
Oh, that's the $60 million question, isn't it? I would love to build Urban Fox as an incredible company. In as much as possible to be an innovative company. Who knows what the future holds? If someone offered me a few $100 million in the morning, you never know, I might take it.
Well, if you've just tuned in, that was Daniel Loftus from Urban Fox, and I commend his adaptability and willingness to change course to develop a successful business concept. After the break, we'll be joined by Brian Kehoe from Wexford Local Development, who'll be discussing leader funding and the upcoming tourism forum. So do stay tuned for that.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Southeast